Sony, listen to us! They're no longer closing the PS3 or the Vita stores, which is great news! No longer do we have to rush out and buy bigger storage and panic buy all of the online store exclusives that we can get our hands on. Now, of course, there's always a concern with every digital store that it will eventually close and we can no longer buy and download games from it. But now that Sony has done a U-turn on the store closures and keeping them running, given what their closest competitor has done with regards to letting us play our older titles, there's more that they can do, and they know it. Now, this is where I'd normally say hello, fellow gamers, but instead I want to say, Sony, we need to talk. Hello, Sony. Firstly, I want to thank you for not closing down the PS3 and Vita online stores. We know you've been scaling down support for these systems for a while now, what with the PS4 and PS5 being in existence, but it means an awful lot for all of us who are fans of these platforms. The reason we appreciate it is obvious. A lot of us still play our PS3s and Vitas. We still want to be able to download games for them that we haven't yet experienced. In addition, there are a few PS3 and Vita exclusives which are really expensive to buy physically, but they are at a more reasonable price on the digital store. There are also plenty of games on these platforms that are digital only. They never got a physical release. Closing the stores would have meant that these games would get lost in the ether and will result in what I'd like to call the PT effect, as there was a time where PS4s were selling on the second-hand market grossly overpriced, just because this elusive Silent Hill demo was installed on them. It may also have led to further piracy while people resort to hacking their PS3s and Vitas just so that they can download and play the games that they were willing to part money for. Now, Sony, you're no stranger to smart decisions. For example, with the PS3, you decided to use common 2.5-inch drives for internal storage, and you let us remove and replace them with faster and larger drives without voiding the warranty of the system. Unlike with your direct competitor at the time, we could increase the capacity of our PS3 internal storage without being forced to buy proprietary hardware, without risk of losing access to any online services, all in aid of us to be able to continue buying and downloading more of your digital games. We get the freedom, and you get more money in your pocket. But that's not to say that you're infallible. There are still decisions that you have made as a company which your fanbase strongly disagrees with. The Vita memory cards are one such example. You decided on a standard off-the-shelf storage solution for your PS3, yet went for proprietary memory cards for the Vita, and then you had the cheek to charge through the nose for them as well. Now that the Vita is considered a retro console and new hardware is no longer being sold for it, memory cards for it are still horribly expensive, not to mention prone to failure after all these years. You could have opted for the SD medium instead, another off-the-shelf storage solution. If anything, doing that would have helped you sell more Vita systems, as anyone could easily expand the internal storage without breaking the bank, potentially freeing up funds for more digital purchases for many years to come. But no, you decided to be greedy and claim all the money from the Vita storage as well. Case in point, Nintendo used SD cards in both their DSi and 3DS systems, both of which were direct competitors for your Vita. Using them wouldn't have been a reason they were more popular, but they certainly didn't suffer as a result. But that was a couple of generations ago. Since then, you've seen massive success with the PlayStation 4, and you're continuing to see success with the PlayStation 5. Now, although many of those purchases have been by bots and scalpers, those who are buying it and playing it, as the system progresses and more games are being sold for it, it's still money in your pocket. To add to these successes, you decided to listen to your fans recently and keep the online stores open for most of your older systems. So with the successes that you've had over the years, it's no stretch to say that you have the power, the money, and the resources in order to make another outstanding business decision. Bring the PS3 and Vita games back to your web store. In the PS3 and Vita's heyday, much like what we can now with the PS4 and PS5, we were able to sign into the PlayStation Store on our computers. We could browse your vast digital catalogue and buy games at ease. The icing on the cake was being able to then queue them up for download on their respective systems, all without having to touch the systems themselves. You offer the same convenient service for the PS4 and PS5 today, and it is such a useful option to have. There's been many a time where I've bought a digital game from your website at work on a morning, queued it up for download on my PS3 at home, and it's there ready to play when I get back in the evening. However, despite making a U-turn on the closure of the PS3 and Vita online stores, games for these platforms have been seriously lacking on your website ever since its revamp in October of 2020. When the newly restyled website was launched, we were no longer able to buy PS3 and Vita games from this store, nor could we queue up any games for download on their respective systems from there. When we were able to buy digital games for them on your website, it was in huge contrast to what the experience is like when trying to browse the stores on the systems themselves, and it's no different today. They are laggy, cumbersome, and when compared to your web store, browsing and buying games isn't quite as easy. We're limited by the controller input, and the design of the stores don't quite allow for general browsing to the same scale as a web storefront does on a computer. And don't tell me this isn't what your customers want. Many times over the past few months, people in the PlayStation community have discovered ways of accessing the old online store, the one with PS3 and Vita games still on it, and they were able to purchase and queue their games for download. But at every turn, you block us out. You are seeing us accessing the old store and intentionally stopping it. You are clearly aware that we want to be able to do this, to easily buy games for our older PlayStations and easily download them legitimately. Now there's the key factor here, the legitimacy. Granted, there is a subset of players who will happily just hack their PlayStations and simply download the ROMs instead of buying them. But just look at how many people legitimately want to give you money for games that they want to play. We simply don't want to be limited by the lackluster stores that only our consoles can access. Please understand, we all still appreciate that you're not going to close the stores that we can access on the PS3 and the Vita. But are you really telling us that this is the only way that we can buy and download these games? With there being no real way of properly emulating games from the PS3 and Vita on your current platforms, well, unless you're able to pull off some sort of a miracle outside of PlayStation Now, it makes sense to make these digital titles easily available for those who still want to play them on the legacy systems. The old web store is still there, and we've proven that it still works. How hard could it be to bring that capability to your current web store? Imagine the swaves of money that are going to come rolling in when PS3 and Vita owners can more easily find games that they want to buy and download. It would certainly more than cover the development costs needed to make it happen, and you are going to have a lot of happy, loyal fans as a result. The next best option that I believe many would be happy with would be to revamp the stores that are accessible via the systems themselves. Even just improving their performance overall would be very welcome to the millions of players who are still using these consoles. Now you don't need to take my word for it. The likes and comments associated with this open letter will hopefully show you how strongly the community feels about this. Why not take that next step? So please, Sony, bring PS3 and Vita games back to your web store. If making millions of people around the world happy isn't enough motivation for you, here's one thing for you to consider. Imagine what the income would be. Your annual financial report will thank you. I await your reply. Yours sincerely, the Multi-Gen Gamer.